mentioned, my name is Robby Dick, and I'm in the Solutions Marketing Organization at BMC Software and have been since 1999. And it's my pleasure and honor to speak with you today. There are a number of folks on the webinar today live, and vast majority I am familiar with. So a lot of familiar names. I'm not going to go into all the background and details of me because it doesn't really matter. And most of you I know we've worked together many years. There's some new names as well. But regardless, thank you all for joining. As we get going here, if you do have any questions, please feel free to ask them at any point in the Q&A panel that you see in the player and near the end of the presentation today. So in about 25 or so minutes, I expect to be near that point. I'll address any questions that may come in. So you can ask them at any point, but I will save going through them until near the end. And again, probably just about a half hour or so today, give you some time back. But let's get to it. Put big data to work with Hadoop and workload automation. So just we'll cover a couple topics, but a little bit about why Hadoop is growing as fast as it is, how workload automation can help speed the creation of Hadoop-related workloads and that are related to those Hadoop services, and increase the level of service that you provide really with workload automation into a Hadoop environment. So real quick, and again, I know many of the names on here, I know we've had some discussions in recent months at various events about your level of involvement of Hadoop-related services at your company. But real quick on what is Hadoop, why is it becoming such a big deal as it is today. So traditionally, there's lots of data in the environment, and historically that's a large amount of data, although it's a vast, it's a minute portion of the overall amount of data that you have. You take some section of that data and throw it on some big, expensive, usually not powerful enough hardware, and you process through it, and it does it very sequentially, and it takes a long time, and it limits the benefit you get from it. And to begin with, it's a tiny fraction of the overall amount of data that you have in the environment. But this is the environment that we live in today, that pre-big data. With big data and bringing Hadoop into the environment, so not talking workload parts yet, just big data, and why is it so important now? Taking that amount of data and not even just that fraction of it, but maybe a majority or at least a significantly larger portion of an amount of data than you already have in the environment, and putting that or processing that, going through it on a large number of fairly standard or commodity off-the-shelf sorts of hardware. So the same amount of data, or potentially magnitudes of order larger amounts of data, and processing it on just easy to obtain, easy to fire up machines in the data center. So the ability to get more business benefiting information and analytics off of a larger set of data. That's Hadoop or big data in a very small nutshell. We live in a very digital world. You all know that. Our lives are unbelievably different than they were just a few years ago, and the pace of that change and the reliance on digital things in our personal lives and our business lives is increasing at a pace, ever quickening pace. So roughly speaking, about every 2 years now, the amount of data that's created doubles, and that may be even a little bit less than every 2 years now. And right about now, estimates say that there's somewhere nearing 20 exabytes of data in the environment. So it's staggering the amount of data that's there, and you can see just according to IDC estimates where that amount of data is going here in the very near future. So massive amounts of data. The big problem is, as I just alluded to, is according to IDC again, less than approximately 0.5% of that data is used and interrogated, and it impacts the business. So about 0.5%. It's amazing just the scale of data that we're talking about, and how little of it is actually looked at for business benefiting reasons. Big data it's it is not going mainstream. It is mainstream now. It is and has been for a number of years. But as every day goes by, more and more companies are getting involved in it. Many of you, I know, are specific to infrastructure and operations, or more in the traditional job scheduling, workload automation arenas. And as every month goes by, an event I cover, the discussions a couple years ago or a year and a half ago, when Control M and Workload Automation from BMC Software were just getting involved with the big data environment, nobody knew anything about it, myself included. I mean, it was an area that none of us had any familiarity or experience with. But that's every event that goes by where I talk to existing customers, that that same core audience that has used and loves Control M, or just is aware of the principles of workload automation. They start to know more and more about big data, or hear about it, or have discussions with others in your company about it. But a very common issue, and one of the top reasons, if not the top reasons, many companies indicate they're having difficulty actually taking advantage of big data in their production environment, is the problems that they're having integrating it with the existing infrastructure. Big data does not exist as an island on its own. It's important to be integrated with the data warehouses and existing analytics and that massive amounts of data that you have in the environment. It does not sit in a vacuum, and that is one of the major reasons that its adoption is a little bit problematic. Specifically, or certainly in a well-managed environment that is using workload automation principles or a specific solution across the enterprise, they have the answer right there, and that's what we're going to talk about as we get going here. But difficulties integrating the existing infrastructure with this new big data or Hadoop environment is a big problem. We'll get to the solution in a minute. Many of you already know about it, but that's applying workload automation principles and specific solutions to it. But what does a typical Hadoop project look like? Basically, while the underlying technology and specifics of it might be a little different or a lot different, it's like any other project that's in the IT environment. There's data that's involved. Usually there's code that's written. There's some testing of that code, and then some tweaking and modification and back and forth, quite often between application developers and the operators. Because ultimately, this Hadoop project, just like any other project that is being investigated or is known to have business, benefiting impact, it needs to get into production, and that's the world most of us live in on a regular basis. But so that's kind of the end goal. That once those projects are in production and providing business value, that's where you differentiate yourself, where you make your money, where you provide the services that make you and your companies who they are. But there's code and testing and collaboration that needs to happen in those projects all along the way, just almost identically to any other application or technology, whether it's new or been in the data center for a long, long time. When you're talking just about big data and Hadoop specifically, there is a significant part of the processing in a Hadoop environment that's batch. Hadoop is changing maybe at a pace faster than any other technology has or currently is, for sure. So it changes literally almost on a weekly, certainly on a monthly or on a quarterly basis. It is significantly changing. But Hadoop processing has been, and a majority of it continues to be, related to batch or workload. So here's a small example of a script on the right-hand side. I don't know if you can see the details, but it's just a Unix shell script where there's 20 or so lines that are related to that are a script related to Hadoop processing. Maybe it's a Java MapReduce, some programming, or Hive or Scoop. It really doesn't matter the details, but in order to get that processing integrated into the environment, as is so important, and just to do the processing inside the application itself, you want everyone to be spending all the time working on scripts. Now, there's people that care about the scripts, that's what they get paid to do, but how about all of the parts related to that script and that processing, about where is it getting the data, where is it putting the data at the end? am I on time with the processing that's occurring in the transfer of data to the environment and then out of, and then the processing inside the environment itself. And even with workload automation in place, sometimes things fail. What happens when something fails? Where were you at in the program? Where is the output contained, or so that I can have a look at it? Excuse me for 1 second. I apologize, I had to cough. I put it on mute. What about the need to rerun, maybe from the point of failure or from the beginning? How about cleanup when there are issues? Or often with workload automation and Control M, many of your issues can go away, but there's still cleanup that needs to be done of that output, maybe archiving of log and output information for audit purposes, future audits that need to look back at what's happened in the past. Of course, when there are issues, the ability to troubleshoot it quicker than ever before and get answers. It's a lot of concepts that workload automation and Control M specifically have addressed today, regardless of platform or application. So there's a fair amount of scripting that's involved, but same idea for creating those jobs, for managing them, for monitoring them, for recovering from them or attempting to when failures occur, and to see how they ran in the past or potentially in the future when things are good or bad. So can it be done with scripting? It can, but that's with a huge amount of time and effort and a waste of resources in the environment. Many of you know that is what Control M is built to do. It's built to support the enterprise, and now for well over a year, that enterprise and the workload automation is included the support for Hadoop processing as well. So here's a flow of jobs in Control M version 8. They've all run successfully. I can tell that by the fact that they're green. Maybe in this case now there's some Hadoop jobs or processing at the beginning, like a pig or a hive or a scoop job that runs before maybe a data stage job or some Informatica processing or some database jobs or business objects reports, and then maybe that goes back to the mainframe or hits Amazon EC2 cloud, or then we need to do a backup. Regardless of the technology of the application, Control M is built to support all of that processing from a single point of control, as many of you know. The specifics of Control M for big data, specifically Hadoop. So for over a year now, Control M has supported Hadoop, and there's been a couple releases along the way, and here you see kind of the current state of support that Control M provides for specific applications or programs in a Hadoop environment. So things like Pig and Hive and Scoop were originally supported over a year or so ago when the Control M for Hadoop first came out. Recent enhancements add support for Tajo, for Kerberos support, Hive Server 2, the ability to encrypt the login credentials. So we'll see a few details on a few of these here in a second, but it has always provided the ability to see native job output, so Hadoop specific formatted and accessible information right from the Control M screens is available as well. And we are now over a year on our Control M for Hadoop support. There's a dedicated development team to keeping on top of the Control M for Hadoop application interface and updating it when needs occur, which is fairly frequently with Hadoop as it's changing on a regular basis. Here's a little bit more detailed view of what the job definition screen looks like for a Control M for Hadoop job. So it is version 8 and basically has a very identical, I'll say, or nearly identical look and feel compared to other jobs in the environment with the scheduling section and the prereqs and actions. Here we're looking at the general section, but because it's a Hadoop type of job, you see in the execution type pull down, which is selected here, the list of supported projects in a Hadoop environment. So Java MapReduce, Pig, Hive Scoop I mentioned, Tajo is in there, an HDFS file watcher command. Streaming was recently added as well as a supported execution type. So when you create a Control M job, regardless of application, it looks like many or any of the other Control-M jobs, but because this is Hadoop specific, there's a section in the job definition screen that is specific to Hadoop. You can see the pre-commands there. While it's not shown, it's kind of called out here. The ability to run pre or post commands. So there you see a number of HDFS commands that you might want to run before or after. You know, move a file, copy a file, maybe create or remove a directory before or after. The actual execution of the Java MapReduce script are all options that you can easily take through the pull downs in the Control-M for Hadoop job definition screen. If the job needs parameters, again, there's no details listed here, but the job may need certain parameters associated with it, all able to be done right through Control-M for Hadoop. And you see a listing here of Apache Hadoop distributions that Control-M for Hadoop supports. All the big ones, Cloudera, MapR, and Hortonworks, as well as Pivotal and Big Insights. Rough guidance is basically any non-fork Hadoop distribution would be supported by the Control-M for Hadoop interface. Of course, if you have a specific question you can ask or contact your BMC contacts if you have some more detailed questions. But it's the big Hadoop distributions we now all support. The left-hand screen here is hopefully very familiar to you. Again, it's version 8 where you're monitoring a job that's running in the environment. This happens to be a Hadoop-specific job. In this case, it is a scoop job, so you can see in the execution type there. But the concept is the same. So the ability to monitor state and status of all jobs in the environment, assuming your permission to do so. And for a Hadoop job, it's no different. Of course, you see the details of the Hadoop job in the what section, and you have access to the native Hadoop output right from the Control-M active environment. So a single click on that hyperlink job ID there will open up the Resource Manager report right from the Control-M screen. So if you're an application developer, or even if you're an infrastructure and operations, maybe an operator, regardless of their role, again, if you're permissioned to do so, you can click on that hyperlink and see the native Hadoop output and information about that step or the steps in that job with a single click in just a matter of seconds. Now, you also may or may not be familiar with Control-M self-service. So the remaining images here are images of Control-M self-service, both the web interface as well as the tablet and the mobile device interface. So as I mentioned earlier, Control-M is built to support the enterprise mainframe to mobile to any platform or application in between. So if you now need to involve Hadoop jobs in the environment, again, assuming the users are permissioned to do so, they can check the state and status and even take some have some interaction with those jobs through the self-service web interface or through the mobile, the self-service mobile app interface. So the ability to monitor workflows regardless of your role, again, assuming permissions allow, for Hadoop jobs, just as you can with any other supported applications or technologies in the Control-M environment. The connection profiles, the way that Control-M connects to those to a Hadoop environment is the same as we do for any of the other control modules. So if any of you are using the Advanced File Transfer module, or for Control-M for SAP, or for Java, or messaging, or web service, or business objects, or Informatica, really that's just a minor listing of all the supported applications that Control-M has. The way we connect with a Hadoop environment is very similar. There is a connection profile that's created by a privileged user, particularly or specifically from the Control-M Configuration Manager. And here you can see that's been accessed, and you see details of the Hadoop connection as well as the Scoop connection. So there, on the left-hand side, you can see the Hadoop path, to the libraries and the binaries and the pig and the hive specific information. Scoop connections have some specific details associated with them, and in this case you can see how the screen where those are defined and managed by a privileged user in the control M environment. But again, exactly like it is for any other of the supported applications in the control M environment, you do it the same way for Hadoop. Of course, they have Hadoop-specific terms and screens, but once you know how to manage an application and that connection for one type in the control M environment, you have it across the board. So rest assured, you can start to implement control M for Hadoop in your environment very, very quickly. Now, Hadoop has a built-in scheduling solution. It is called Oozie. Just like most every other application or technology, it has a built-in solution for managing batch or workload components. And there is the ability to convert from a number of third-party purchase schedulers in addition to some built-in application schedulers to get it into the control M environment, and Hadoop Oozie is one of those. So the most recent enhancements added support for an SAP conversion as well as Hadoop Oozie. So Hadoop Oozie, again, built-in scheduling solution, quite often how many people start. Certainly sites that don't have an enterprise workload automation solution may start with Oozie, and it is very problematic. It is certainly a built-in one, but just like Unix and Linux has a built-in scheduler called cron, and Windows has a Windows scheduler or at scheduler, they're very rudimentary, they're very basic, they have no concept of services, they have very limited error checking and automated remediation options available to them. There's just a very large list of problems with it. Although, again, sites that don't have enterprise workload automation and they have Hadoop people that are okay to program, they'll start using that, and it's a major impediment to delivering services as quickly as possible and and servicing them at a high level. It just can't be done. That might be a little bit too strong a term, but it requires massive amounts of scripting and coding, and in the real world, that doesn't happen. Those folks need to be worried about the hive parts of their script or the scoop or the Java map reduce code, not the workload related parts. So the connection information, the error checking, the log cleanup and archiving, the ability to forecast future day or do what ifs, the ability to look at how the jobs ran in the past, simply the ability to sequence the jobs in a way that if job 1 finishes with a certain return code, then you want to take a certain path with a different one, a different path. So almost no built-in scheduling solution, regardless of the application, has those capabilities, and Hadoop Oozie is no different. It doesn't have them. And so to get any level of capability or functionality, it's a lot of scripting and coding, and even then, when done, and it takes significant portions of time, and it's not nearly as complete or capable as a control and workload automation solution for all those areas that I just described. So there is a conversion utility, and it supports conversion from Hadoop Oozie. So if you do have big data initiatives and they've already started to use Hadoop Oozie, you can get there. But quite honestly, it's better to get in front of them before they even start using it, so they can see all the capabilities that you can provide to them in your well-managed workload automation environment, and they can start from the beginning worrying specifically about the big data, the Hadoop parts, not the workload parts. So why BMC software? I know, again, looking at the attendee list, that the vast majority of you are existing customers, so you know the merits of Control M regardless of the technology or the application in the environment. But just for those that may not know, or just as a refresher, Gartner recently published a list of vendors in the big data space that, whether it's a distributor or specifically around security, and identified the management of Hadoop environments and workflows and workloads as only being provided by BMC with the Control-M solution. So that is something that we're very proud to be to have started with, and continue to really be the only management vendor that supports workloads and Hadoop, and we do that with Control-M. We also have been for a number of months now a Hortonworks partner, and just very recently added Cloudera and MapR as well. So I mentioned some of the Hadoop distributions, those three, as well as a few others earlier that we support, but now we are actively engaging with the big three distributions, Hortonworks, Cloudera, and MapR, on partnering on how to get the message across how workload automation can really make significant improvements in the level of service and the speed with which you can deploy, manage, and maintain Hadoop-related services. A couple more bits of information before I get to any questions. One is, for more information, you can go to www.bmc.com/Hadoop and find significant amount of information. Some of it is a little bit high level or higher level. Some is a little bit more detailed about Control-M for Hadoop. Really, there's a nice range, but it's easily identifiable. Can see some videos on how to connect big data into the enterprise, particularly with Control-M workload automation. And again, additional, more technical information is available there as well. And we do have a couple questions, but just before I get to those, I do want to make mention of BMC Engage 2015. So it's coming up in Las Vegas in early September, and you can go to engage.bmc.com right now to find out some details and see some samplings of the sessions and the track and what's are expected. But we started the worldwide conference up again last year, and it was an excellent event. The event last year had a track specific to Control-M workload automation with about 13 or so sessions, and the plans I'm happy to say are going to do that again. So in early September in Las Vegas at BMC Engage 2015, there'll be a couple hundred technical sessions with a dedicated track to workload automation, and certainly we'll have some discussions there, maybe a few presentations specific to Control-M or workload automation and Hadoop, but just something I wanted you to be aware of. And you can go to engage.bmc.com to see more details on that. Now, there are a couple questions that I want to get to, and then just to give you back, send you off with just one more reminder. But first question, can the app dev people create and monitor jobs? So there's quite a bit more to Control-M workload automation that I didn't cover here that certainly are worthy of mention, but yes, so application developers, so if we're talking about big data types of folks, big data analysts or programmers, there is a way that they can create and monitor jobs in the environment. I talked about the monitoring of them in the, earlier on in the presentation. That's really one way that can be done is with Control-M self-service and the self-service mobile application. So again, assuming that those users have been given permission by a privileged user in the environment, they can use the web browser or the mobile device mobile application to see the status of their workloads, and potentially, again, if permission, take actions like rerun, look at the output, look at the log, potentially even kill a job, or potentially order in already created jobs in the environment that may not be in today's active environment. So those actions can all be done through Control-M self-service in the mobile app. I didn't mention in much detail, maybe not at all, about creation of new jobs in the environment. So that is able to be done by application developers, whether it's Hadoop specific or any other application in the environment, and that's with Control-M Workload Change Manager, which is a web-based interface that allows business users or non-infrastructure and operations folks specifically like application developers, an interface that they can very easily use to create jobs in the environment. Now, when they create those jobs, they don't go straight into the production environment or even the test if that's the environment you're in. They would be submitted to the production control team and or the scheduling team, but to a privileged user that would verify and then check in or potentially make some changes, or to return to the original requester with some notes if there's additional if there's issues with the job. So I didn't talk about Workload Change Manager at all, but that is the component that allows application developers to create jobs in the environment. Another question is, how many jobs will big data introduce into my environment? So I laugh a little bit because that one's very hard to answer specifically. It really depends on specifics, but it's easily going to add dozens, if not hundreds, or even thousands or tens of thousands of jobs in the environment. It really depends on the specifics, but safe to say, Control-M is built to support the enterprise, anywhere from 50 jobs to a million or millions of jobs running a day, regardless of the underlying technology. I mean, Control-M is built to support that as an enterprise workload automation solution. So I think I did fail to tell you how to get a hold of me earlier today if you don't know. So if you want some more specific, if you have more specific questions, you certainly can send me an email at robby_dick@bmc.com. There is one other question here that is, which version of the Hadoop control module is that? My screen doesn't look like the one presented. So so I have a guess as to what screen you're talking about. That is the version that was released, I'll say, about 2 months ago. So it is, the specific version escapes me. I apologize. That might be Fix Pack 1, but that's a little bit of a guess. But it came out about a month ago, maybe 2 months ago. That's the version that it is version 8, and that's the version that added support for things like Tajo and some more HDFS commands and the streaming option. So again, Control-M for Hadoop started its life a little bit over a year ago, and there's been a couple of releases. The most recent one was a couple months ago, can be found on the EPD site and at the documentation site, but approximately about 2 months ago is when that was released. Before I turn it back over to Kyle, just remind you one more time, if you want to see some more details, you can go to www.bmc.com/Hadoop and see some funny infographic type information, some videos about the concept, some white papers, some blogs, a vast amount of information about Control-M, about Control-M for Hadoop, and just about, in general, how to implement and involve big data and Hadoop processing into the enterprise. Thank you very much for attending. With that, I want to turn it back over to Kyle.
Thank you. This does conclude today's webinar. Thank you all for your participation. You may